Welcome to EdPost Conversations. I am so excited to welcome Marley Dias to the conversation. She's a literary activist and founder of 1000 Black Girl Books, the author of Marley Dias Gets It Done, and So Can You. She's the ambassador of the National Education Association Read Across America, as well as a host and executive producer of Netflix's Bookmarks, celebrating Black voices. And on top of all of this, she's a college student at Harvard. Welcome, Marley, and thank you for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. And, Marley, you are 19 years old, and from the outside, it looks like you are living your best life and definitely giving off that main character energy. Um, so, would you tell us a little bit about where your activism journey began and what moved you to get involved as a young person?
So, my story begins as a young girl in fifth grade. I grew up in West Orange, New Jersey. I'm an only child. My mom is a sociologist. My dad's a geographer. My mom's Jamaican. And it was just like a very loving, encouraging, diverse household where reading and literacy was really center for me because I grew up being super shy and quiet as a child. So, I just read so much and noticed that in my fifth grade classroom, the books that was assigned did not have Black girls as the protagonists. And I don't think that this was a reflection of my teacher having any sort of intentional exclusion of these stories, but rather that when we don't think about diversity and inclusion, and if we're not active in those steps, we can cause harm. So I felt like my story just wasn't being reflected, but I knew those books were out there and I had read them in my home. So the next year I talked to my mom in a conversation at our local diner over pancakes. And I told her that I was sick and tired of reading about white boys and their dogs, that I wanted to see myself as the hero, as not just as the best friend or as the sidekick, or through historical narratives that talk mainly about the oppression of Black individuals and not about our successes and sort of the true histories and richness that we bring to this country and to this world. And she encouraged me to do something about it. So that work turned into wanting to collect 1,000 books with Black girl protagonists and donate them to a school in Jamaica in 2016. And now it is 2024. And like you said, I have collected 14,000 books through the 1,000 Black Girl Books campaign with an intention to go back to Jamaica in May of this year. And we'll just continue to do this work, and really it has evolved into, of course, this mission for diversity and representation in children's literature, but also making sure that young people's voices are brought to the conversation of social change, and that we rely on intergenerational exchange as a way to showcase the good that Gen Z has to offer to the world.
Mhm. So many good points there. So all of the books are going to Jamaica. They're not in US
Oh
schools.
no, not all the books are going to Jamaica, but that is just sorry, those were just two of the main trips. But I've donated
Okay.
books. We keep at least one of every book that we've collected, and every other copy gets donated. So
Nice.
now we've donated books in Philadelphia and New Jersey, New York, Michigan, all over the world, Ghana, and just continue to do the work anywhere that these stories are needed, which is essentially everywhere.
Right. Absolutely. And did you find that a lot of your peers were experiencing the same things, and how important it was for them to not only hear stories of young protagonists that looked like them or who had similar stories to them, but to hear stories of all kinds of different people, a diverse group of people in their narratives, either in school or outside.
I think that when I started 1,000 Black Girl Books, I was so young, really speaking about like super, really urging and finally pushing and trying to take a stand against something that was definitely difficult because I was critiquing something that's happening within my own community. So when it says like when I speak about my literal peers and the people that I was around, I think that they're one of the beautiful things about my campaign is that regardless of where you necessarily stand on like the way I may choose to attack these issues or like what I view as the essential problems that lead to this lack of representation, we can generally all agree that we deserve to be the main characters of our own lives. We can all agree that it feels good to see yourself as the main character, and we know what that feels like. We can all name experiences where representation has been useful to our development as young people. So I've had experience. I think that people have always agreed with that and have always been supportive of the sort of moral and ethical question that 1,000 Black Girl Books asks, which is like, what happens to a group of people when you only show them negative representations of themselves, even though they know that there are contradictions to that? And everybody deals with that. But I think that when it comes to me being a young Black girl with like no professional training, no sort of like being just too young to do things, I don't think that like it was easy. It has been easy and remains like just a challenge. I think more better, obviously, because I'm getting older, but like still, you can see how just being a young person in these spaces can make you be not necessarily infantilized, but just sort of like not able to the fact that you're speaking makes can sometimes limit what is actually being heard, because the phenomenon of your ability and your articulation of yourself sometimes, at least for me, was difficult in trying to communicate and translate to my community that like this is about racial inequity and that like something that is happening here is racially unequal, and that was difficult to deal with being such a young person sort of calling this thing out as violent against Black women and girls. And I've always had that perspective, and that's like an unwavering, I can't change that or edit that in any way. That is the fact of what's happening. And I think for my peers, when we're so young, for me to be going, traveling all these places, like calling out all these things, using all the big words and all the big moments, I definitely think it's not that it's isolating, it's very inspiring, but also is very intimidating as like something that, young people can be called upon to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, a very difficult position to be in. And I have to ask, with all of the good work that you're doing as a literary activist and all the work that you've done up until this point with the Thousand Black Girl Books Project and distributing the books and talking to people in ways that you are and bringing up these crunchy, difficult issues. What is your take on the situation we find ourselves in with the educational gag orders and the book bans that seem to be getting worse and worse across the nation, and how simply reading in classrooms is so politicized today?
It's incredibly unfortunate. I think that when I started this campaign, there was absolutely nothing going on like what we see today. There was nothing happening in this country that had the level of polarization about the access to literacy. And I
Mhm.
think that when we look at this crisis, it really speaks to, and I think at least for me as a Harvard student now, being able to have resources to understand and look at the legacy of just oppressed groups across the world, but both including the Black community in the United States and just internationally, how we try to oppress people. When we take away people's literacy, we take away their freedom. So
Mm,
regardless of how a person might feel about the actual content of the material that you're seeing, which most of which is just accurate and diverse representations of these oppressive movements, of self-expression and self-valuation, of self-determination for people on the outskirts of society in smaller communities that are outside of the majority, to take those stories away and then to also just take the ability for people to process and understand those narratives by just not giving them as many books as we
mm,
used to give kids, by not being in a society that props up reading and community time in the way we used to. Generation Alpha and later parts of Gen Z are losing so much. And they're losing so much of their freedom, their ability to decipher and understand that they are experiencing a socially unequal experience is incredibly limited, and now can only be fed through social media. And I
mm,
think that that is something that for parents, for those who speak on the other side of book banning and have these very deep this very deep desire to perform the tyranny of the few, to be the parent that takes away everyone else's freedom because of their individual sensitivity towards the true history of an oppressed group, to be that person means that you officially want to commodify freedom again. And we've seen over and over across our nation and the world's greatest nations that the only thing that can come out of that is revolution and change, and that we will have to take a very swift and dramatic response against book banning in order to change these things.
mm,
And with an election coming up, I think that book banning cannot be brought, it needs to be brought to the top of the list of things to judge our future political leaders on, because literacy is the one thing that we know people must have to be free and to stay free across any community, any race, any ability. If you cannot read, if you have not had access to the history of the place that you're living in, you will not be able to understand what's going on. And now we have digital pathways that create very violent ways to get access to that information, most of which is not true or not, giving you a full picture. So like what is happening? That's really my only response, is that this is an incredibly urgent civil rights issue that speaks and relies on the brink of freedom. And I am doing everything in my power to first, like, treasure the access to information I now have as a student at one of the most elite colleges and universities in the world. Is that the best thing that I can do right now, I think, in this crisis, is because, like, I want to spend time, like, at Harvard, embracing my college experience, getting access to all the resources I can to be trained better as an activist, and of course, working with the National Education Association as their Read Across America ambassador. Those are two things I can do where I can't necessarily get my boots on the ground, but I can try to decommodify the knowledge that I have. That,
Mm.
like, the resources, the access, the opportunities I have, I think it is embedded into my character and into the work that I do, that, like, my interest in being at Harvard is to try to get access to all the pieces of our Black history that are here, like, see the archival material, be in the classrooms, talk to the professors, always go the extra mile to get access to our stories, because I can bring that back to so many others just through the platform that I have. So while, of course, like, I have said and agree that this is like a civil rights issue, I know that right now I'm not able to get my boots on the ground in the way that I would want to as a college student, just because of, like, how demanding it is to be a Harvard student. But I know that by me taking the opportunity to constantly extend and to constantly encourage, sharing the knowledge that I have and the resources I have, I hope that by giving that quality to other Harvard students, we can try to decommodify our educations, because it is obviously worth, it is a priceless education and experience, but it is not worth how limited people are. Like, it is not worth how limiting the sort of the amount of people that are able to have access to Harvard's resources are. I think that we need to continue to spread and share all of the gifts that having the North America's largest library and university archive has to offer on a crisis on teaching pedagogy in classrooms. Like, we know. So I want to keep sharing that and doing everything I can to think really hard about the place I'm in and what I can do.
Wow. Wow. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that about their experience in college as a young person. But
Thank you.
that's such an amazing goal, and so so thoughtful about how you're using the opportunity that you have there, to share that knowledge. And I love that. And I want to go back to you talking about there needs to be a revolution and asking the question, what is going on? Because we've asked that same question year after year after year when we see some, it's almost like satire is gone because you see something on television or you see something in the news and say that this cannot be real, but now it's real, right? And we ask this question all the time: what is happening in this world? You talked about really a full scale revolution needs to happen, to stop this, to stop what's happening in the classrooms and over the larger, the larger ecosystem that's happening out there with all of these attacks. As someone who's watching these upcoming elections and watching the political candidates and vetting, what would you tell young people who are out there who have the voice, your fellow Gen Zs, maybe even the younger millennials, the Gen Alphas? What should they be doing? What should they be looking for? What should they be calling out around this upcoming election, to vet out the very best candidates to vote for?
I think that when it comes to voting, as especially this is my first presidential election, I'm like not in the I'm not in the perfect position to speak on this, but I am in a position that I should. But when it comes to voting, at least for me, a huge part of it is just thinking about not necessarily like just the can like of course think about the candidate themselves, consider their policies, who they are, their background, what they say and what they do, and where those two things don't
Mhm.
meet. Um, but of course, there's also thinking about the longevity of what they mean as like a representation within our political world. So when we think about someone winning, we don't want to just or think about like voting for someone because we like them. We also have to, like, as an individual, we also have to think about who else they hurt or help around us.
Mhm.
So even if we're, as a person, I should not just be looking into a candidate's issues, thoughts on Black racial inequality. Like that is not, or LGBTQ sort of social rights and things, like things that just represent my identity and what I care for. I also need to be looking at infrastructure because I like to go on walks. And if they don't care about creating public parks and walkable cities for me as a non-driver, that is something I need to consider. So it's really walking through the list of needs that you have as a community member and not just as an individual. So like when we vote, we should be thinking about who else they serve and who else they hurt. Because in the current American political system, I think the reason why I care so much about this sort of longevity piece is because we are so determined by backlash. Everything since 2016 has pretty much been it goes one way and then everyone gets mad and it goes the complete other way. And then we go one way. It just has been a figure eight of going around the exact same solutions, discussions, arguments, like moral questions, political and ethical questions. And we need to think about candidates that don't put us into a polarized box in one way or another. We need to think about people who are actually interested in the transformation of these systems so that we don't continue ourselves finding like a hero on one side and not having someone who can actually sustain building a complete unified American body politic that is served in their public health, which affects people of both sides of the aisle, in their ability, like in their environmental issues, in like all of the things that connect us as a global and national community are really things that we don't prioritize a lot when we vote anymore because we care so much about how we feel. And I think when it comes to voting, it should really be about separating and taking intentional time to realize what you as a community member, what would upset you, even if it's not something that would directly affect you, and looking at what a candidate does in response to crises that you don't necessarily realize are a part of your life, but would be and will be. And people will react and things will change based on the decisions that are made by this candidate. So let's really think about who they are, not just to us, but to all of the sort of all of the histories that in the spaces they take up.
Wonderful. All right. Ooh, we got heavy real quick there, right? We're going to come back to politics and activism, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about your journey. And you are a book author too, right? And
Mhm,
Marley Gets It Done. So,
mhm.
what was that like to write a book, and what did you hope that your book would bring to its readers? What was the like the call to action in that?
Yeah, Marley Dias Gets It Done is really a way to provide a how-to guide and give a long form of a long-standing form and physical media to like my brain as a 12-year-old kid who has this level of passion. I think that now like the way I talk about and think about 1000 Black Girl books really comes from such a like so I mean I'm a sociology and African American studies student now at Harvard. So I just am thinking about these things a lot differently than I used to. And I it's not that I feel like I've become dogmatic in any way, but like the stakes are higher and they feel higher to me now as a 19-year-old person and when versus when I was 12. Like when I was 12, I think that I was really speaking and I love every time I like read it or do readings or anything, it's so great because I think I'm really speaking to like the pathos of 1000 Black Girl books, not the ethos, which is like my whole thing I've been on now, where it's just like I feel like I've grown to become a witness to the shift in this industry and I can speak to those changes and that transformation. But then I just didn't know. I didn't know. You know, I didn't know that I was going to have a legacy. I didn't know that there would be more that there would be 7 more years now and ongoing of me talking about writing a book when I wrote it. I didn't think that there would be a legacy to what I was doing. I was doing it because I love it. Like I was doing it because I literally just wanted to see Black girls wearing boas and poodles walking the streets of Paris in the books I read. Like that is the reason why I am having this conversation with you today, you know? And I like can love that the book really just captures the pure unadulterated joy of like believing that you can do it and getting the chance from older people to do it. Like the book is successful. Kids love it. Like parents love it. I feel so much like love and support for the project. And I'm so happy that I was able to capture truly like the joy of change making in a way that like I now simply as a like just as an older person, I feel that same way, but I can't describe like I know so I just have able to there's so much more I consider. I think I consider and would want to express that's like very complicated and nuanced and theory and da da da. Like I've just become all clouded. I get clouded with the adulting and trying to like pretend like I'm serious. But then there was never, it was just love and passion. And it maintains and remanifests itself, but it's a different type of joy that I'm really glad I captured in it. It was hard to write in middle school. I mean, you can definitely read that I'm in middle school, which is good. Scholastic did everything. We did everything to keep it a perfect balance of a great story and my tone and just who I am. And I'm really proud of it as just a time capsule of like when you give young people a chance they can actually give you incredible insights into what can actually make a child like go out there and just rock it. Like I was rocking it. Like I am not like that now. Like I was so much cooler back then, you know, in a way. Like I was so free. Like I just had such there was such a freedom
Mhm.
that I think the book really captures of like being able to just go with your gut, combine your passion and your frustration and create something great. And it's just the thing I'm most proud of, obviously by far.
Oh, I'll tell you that how many times, and not just kids who are afraid to look for an opportunity or try to get adults to give them an opportunity or afraid to take a chance on an idea, but even adults out there in the world that are afraid to move forward with an idea when they have it or move forward with an opportunity. It's like, it's so inspiring to hear 12-year-old Marley talking about you can do it. And that joy that you talk about, that there's nothing like the young joy, right? As we get older, we get a little bit more, like you said, cloudy and a little bit more jaded. And we have all that theory to back everything up. And we're serious because we know
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
we know the stakes now. Like at 12, maybe you didn't exactly understand how serious some of those things were and how this would impact us moving down the road. But,
And it
you
also
know,
didn't look like things were gonna get worse. It
right.
also just didn't look like I just didn't have to speak from like I was like we were up when 1000 like when my
Mhm.
campaign became successful like that actually did change and transform like the book industry and the way that authors talk
Yes.
and thought about it. Like there's this random 12-year-old kid who's just like showing up to all of our events now and loves to read and just like wants more books. Like I was able to make a direct impact by just like you know what I mean? Sending things in a more positive direction. And now it's sort of been like trying to reinforce and bring back old ideas and like keep things where they once were. And it used to be like creative and more generative sort of practice of activism in a way now where I think it's like preserving the things that I've created has been the job in post I think mid high like high school and on.
As the political environment has shifted to something a bit darker than where you started, and way more complicated than it, and almost might I say ridiculous than what it was way back in the day. It's yeah, preserving this great work that you've done is I can see a challenge because have you had any books on your list banned? Have you calculated those?
My how many books on my list have been
Have you
banned?
looked to see how many books on that
I
list
have
of your
not
how many
looked, but
books
I
that are
know.
on
I mean,
your
I am can
Thousand Black Girls books? Have any of them been on the banned books list?
oh, 100%. Jacqueline Woodson is one of the most banned authors of our day, and she's also the greatest author of the 21st century. So I'm just gonna say that to Cameron. Like I have no like there like I don't really have another debate for that. So I think that like that just goes to show that is the book. Reading her book, Brown Girl Dreaming, was the
Mm.
book that made me start 1,000 Black Girl books. That book is one of the most banned books in the country. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? That this story has created that story genuinely created this movement. Like without reading that book, I don't think I would have ever I felt so deeply represented in my humanity as just a young Black girl. I've obviously had read many diverse books and books with Black girl protagonists, but I just felt so personally heard in her story. And I felt so urgently that if I didn't talk about the pain or things that hurt me in my life, that I would just get washed away by like I didn't want to grow up feeling as sort of lonely or not and
Mhm.
not like I was enjoying school, but I was enjoying it not because I felt empowered by it, but it felt just sort of competitive and not like fun. And I wanted to bring back the joy that I had gotten so much in elementary school and just reading with my family. And I read that story and I was like, wow, like if you change your mind and you say you want to do something, you can actually transform yourself and you can transform other people, even if it's just one person.
Mhm.
And it was poetry and it was Black art. And I was like, this is like a real book. Like I'm officially a big girl. Like I just read a piece of literature for the first time where I was deciphering and uncovering and reading again and reading in different orders. And I
Right.
just felt like, wow, this is a story that if they other people don't get to read it, they won't understand me.
Mhm.
And that made me want to collect 1,000 more. So I feel like to hear that to hear and know that that book is banned, that people have to request to read it in schools because it talks about race or racism, that because of Jacqueline Woodson's queerness, she continues to be policed, and not be able to connect with so many students and readers that care about her stories is incredibly disheartening, because these authors and these stories do not last forever. These voices, these minds, like, they have created things that by denying them their right to express their stories, we hurt them so much.
Mhm.
And now that I know Jacqueline Woodson personally, I think it's impossible to imagine how it might feel to have written over 30 plus books about queer Black women's experiences, and any other groups experiences. But as a queer Black woman, as an author, like, in her identity, to be policed in that way while being so prolific is just it's just an impossibility to me. Like, I do not understand and will never understand how we continue to limit things that have only sparked greatness out of people, and
Mhm.
only will continue to do so. Um, so yeah, it's quite disheartening, but I know and I hope that things will change. I mean, I'm determined for them to change. So, like, I'm not gonna, like, I don't. There's no option. Like, there is no option. I will not allow. There is no world in which Black girl stories are not going to be in classrooms and I'm around. Like, that is just not going to happen. So, um, that's how I feel. Like, as much as I don't always have the best calls to action. I don't always have the best strategies, but I know what freedom feels like, and I know what making a reading connection feels like.
Mhm.
And by denying a generation, especially who's been stifled by pandemic education, and
Right.
deeply, how deep the educational disparities are between my education as a person who was affected in their last 2 years of education by COVID versus someone who was affected in their first 2 years, or first, let alone 10 years of at schooling through COVID. I know that education is not what it used to be, and I will continue to stand up for the voices who do not know what they don't know, because that is not fair. It is not fair to the leaders of tomorrow for them to be some of the most one of the most miseducated generations, uh, in our recent history.
Mhm. Yeah, that's like poetic there, because we hear that in a lot of different ways, that how we're not getting the right kind of education for kids in this generation right now, and how long should they wait, um, and how many barriers should they have to deal with, and this is just one
Exactly,
more barrier that we're
a
putting
hundred
in front of
percent.
kids, that is stopping them, impeding them from being great, from being the person that they should be, the person that they're destined to become, right? And I'm going to remember that author and that book, because I'll put it on my list of books to buy for people. And what a dream to meet your
It's
favorite author.
phenomenal. And as an adult, as oh my gosh, I think as an adult, I'd recommend for adults, Red at the Bone, girl. Girl, that's a book. That's a book. If I tell you if there's a book, if there's a novel, it's Read at the Bone. Like, it's so good. I think it's Brown Girl Dreaming is like the book that started 1000 Black Girl Books, but Read at the Bone is, I read summer 2020. That book changed my everything, as well.
Okay.
Like, it's like books can continue, you know what I mean? Like, you have stories. Do you have any? I know this is an interview for me, but do you have any stories that stand out for you as well? I'm curious.
Oh gosh, I don't know that I wasn't a real big reader when I was a kid.
Mm.
Wasn't a big thing in my family, and I remember I was probably in high school when I finally just decided one day I would like to read now. Let's go and get a book. And my mom took me to the bookstore, and I got myself my first book that was my own. I'm a reader now, and I have,
Amazing.
like, quite a variety. And I will say, one that always stands out for me is the book Educated. Um,
Mm.
and that one was such a touching story, that not a very, I guess it was a little empowering, as she does what she does and finds her way out. But I think that story was just so touching,
Yeah.
that when somebody asks me, like, some favorite books, if they're looking for recommendations, that's always one for me. But I do have to tell you that, as we're talking about Black girl books, one that just had me in its grip and I could not put down, Beloved.
Yeah, beloved. I have, oh my God. I like started it and then it got all wet and it's just like made me really sad. Like, you know what I mean? When a book gets wet, it's like, how do we move forward? How do we move forward? Like, it's like the third time I bought Beloved and it's coming though. It's gonna, next time we'll talk again and then I'll have read it and we'll just do a Beloved chat.
I will tell you, like, it was painful to read that book, but I also couldn't put it down because it was so well done. It was
Yeah.
just so well done. And um, when I hear that people ban that one very frequently too, and I think to
Oh,
myself,
yeah, that is also Toni Morrison is also up there. Yeah.
like, it's just it breaks my heart because that story is up there on one of my favorites. I mean, a painful story, but one that should be read by everyone. Um, she was such a great author. Um, but yes, we will definitely have to have more book chats because I have to dig into that
Mhm.
thousand list a little bit more. I got into it a little bit this past week,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
but I do like to look around for books that maybe are a little bit off the beaten path, or ones that you know, that people I think that maybe they haven't seen or haven't engaged with before when I buy gifts for people and their books. So I think that's a great place. Now, speaking of books, the next stop in your journey then is Netflix Bookmarks.
Mhm.
All right. So is this an extension of the Thousand Black Girl books as a way to deliver it in a new medium, or is this something that
Yes, it is. This is sort of just a continuation of saying, like, we are now not able to be in libraries together, we're not in
Mhm.
school, all the places in which the work that I do is really centered, and the mechanisms that both include and exclude these stories don't exist right now. So, how can we make something where parents and kids, primarily Black kids, but also just any person that wants to read and is missing the sort of beautiful feeling of being in a classroom, crisscross applesauce, like talking just and listening to a teacher or someone you love read a story. How can we bring that back? How can we capture that quickly, effectively, and also equitably, which was a huge part of my work. So, as executive producer, Netflix had reached out to me just to sort of take an advising role on a read aloud series they wanted to start. And as they heard my ideas, I was maybe 16 or 15, 16 at the time of this of when
Mm,
these conversations started. They really liked my ideas, and I was working with Dr. Kevin Clark, who they had working as a consultant on the project, who works for the American Library Association and does a bunch of work on sort of the sociological ideas and mechanisms behind why representation is so important and how to design curriculums to help Black kids learn to value themselves. So I was working with him, talking with him, and I decided that, hey, I've helped a good amount. Maybe I could be a little executive producer. And they were like, sure, but do you also want to host the show? And I was like, host it? Yes. So during the summer of 2020, we worked with Netflix and collaborated on this show. It is a limited series. We were not able to continue into another season, but it was nominated for an NAACP Image Award for the Best Kids Program category, and then Lupita Nyong'o won a Children's Emmy for outstanding performance in the show. So I'm really happy that I was able to. I suggested her. I wanted her to be on the show so bad, and to think that this had meaning both to um, sort of like the audience itself and like what we intended to connect with families and connect with homes during COVID and with teachers, because it was free and is free and available online on YouTube as well, which was a huge thing for me that I really wanted. Um, it just means that we can continue this legacy of having these stories and having these counter narratives, and just continuing to keep this history alive, even when classrooms weren't able to, and now are also intentionally not interested in doing. So to have another outlet for teachers is really important.
Well, I have to share with you that I watched every one of them this week. I watched them earlier this week, sat and watched them
Aw,
straight through. But that was great. It was
they're
great.
so cute, right?
Yes, they were, and I especially liked. Uh, I can't even remember what the book title was now, but um, it was done like a coloring page. And as he was reading it, he was jumping behind the clouds, and like it was so cute. It was so
Yeah,
cute
it's
to
so
watch.
cute.
And then, of course, you read the last one that was in the series, right?
Yes, and that book, We March by Shane Evans, is a very popular very popular book and also a very popular banned book
Hmm.
as well. And Shane Evans and I have continued to sort of talk and just support one another because it's so sad to think that a book that I read on the show is a book that kids would not have like now officially do not have access to without a teacher who's brave enough to show that story in a classroom or to show bookmarks in their home.
Mm, that is a shame. And I remember very clearly thinking when that was on that I wanted more of that story. Like I felt like there's nothing in that book, in that story, that would make me say, oh, young kids shouldn't read this. Nothing should be banned or removed from a room about that particular story. Nothing would give me pause. But I guess I would probably say that about most books they ban. So, but yeah, that was a great series. And we have two little ones in the family, and I thought to myself, well, they will enjoy this, so I will absolutely share with them. Now, beyond that, you have, like we talked earlier before we started taping, that you have just a list of these fantastic experiences that have given you, opportunities to meet some equally fantastic people. Interviewing people, be interviewed by people, to be on stages alongside of people, to have conversations with people. And, we don't have time to talk about all of them, but if you can pick, say, three people who were your most impactful, meets along the way, or impactful conversations that could say you'd carry with you in the work that you do from this time forward, who would those
Mm,
people be?
wow. That is a question I have never been asked. I actually need to have a huge think about this. That I've met three people. Okay. First, I would say recently, I'm going to go like, one recent one is Caroline Wanga.
Hmm.
She is the CEO and president of Essence and Essence Ventures. She is just amazing. I spoke at the Essence Girls United Disruptor Summit, and I had the opportunity to just hear her speak and then meet
Hmm.
her after. And I think she just spoke so much to this idea that I now like deeply resonate with about courage and confidence. So like I always get told that I'm confident, that like I'm so intimidating. I'm a lot taller. I'm a lot taller than people think as well. So I'm like 5'9", 5'9.5", which like, you probably didn't expect. I know I'm telling people that is always so fun. So I'm like taller than people think, and my voice is like a little bit deeper, and I speak about very serious things, and I like do generally. I'm a very silly person, but like I do serious things in the world. So like I can just come off as very confident. But I'm really like a super shy person. Like I make my roommate, like when I want to leave a place, I'll text my roommate and be like, can we go soon? I'm too scared to like say goodbye. Like I am a very like awkward, like quiet person when I'm around like my people. So when she was talking about confidence, she said that she does not, and she's perceived as very confident. I perceived her as confident when she was on stage, just killing it, really speaking, like giving so much power to the audience. She said, right now I am so scared, but I'm choosing to have the courage to be confident. And she just continued to speak about like bravery and how all the moments in which like confident people are told that they're acting so, brave, and they're really like, showing how great and strong they are, that like all of us are scared, and it's never about our motivation. It's never about like how we feel. It's always about our willingness to be brave. And that's been huge for me recently, because that is the only thing that has been moving me forward, and has moved my life forward. Like everything that has been great has been like a crazy shot in the dark. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because I'm getting older and I'm getting scared. Like I do not need to be scared of things I'm still very young. Like there is no reason for me to try to limit myself or not be brave in every room that I step into, especially at a place like Harvard. So just that reminder has been hugely important for me. And I heard her speak in November. Then I would say Ava DuVernay was
Mhm.
huge. I met her in 2017 when I was working, or 2016 when I was working with Marley Mag on L.com. So this like young woman at L.com had heard about my story and let me work with her for a summer doing interviews with Secretary Hillary Clinton, Misty Copeland, and Ava DuVernay. So I went down to Essence Fest and started doing all the interviews and just like meeting all of these people that were so like just so they were famous. They were so famous and important and so powerful. And I felt like I was like, wow, like I'm officially like in a place where there are so many Black women that are just like actually incredible. And Ava DuVernay, I had the chance to interview in this really hot, sweaty day in New Orleans when I was so young. And that was one of the scariest. I remember being so intimidated by her, and being like, wow, like there's no one who is greater. And she agreed the next year after the interview to write the forward and introduction to my book, Marley Dias Gets It Done.
Wow.
So she has been a huge mentor and supporter, and she chose me to be her fellow honoree for the Variety Power of Women, like Hollywood event every year where they raise money for foundations and nonprofits. She chose 1,000 Black Girl Books in 2018. And continually, all the people that have sort of come to support me through have heard about me through her. And I've come to recognize like the importance of my work through her support, particularly when like she had just done Selma, and it was like her career is obviously she has done so many phenomenal things since then. And I think it just means so much to me to have also met her before that, and to just have continued to feel so supported by her throughout her own individual success. And that it's just a reminder that like the people who say that they will like lift as they climb, they actually do that. Like she has been an incredible resource to me. And I think that like of people like it's always people of other people of other people that like have believed in me through her belief in me. So I'm really grateful for her. Another person who's been really important to me is Aria Hughes. She's the editorial creative director at Complex. And I had the chance to meet her this year at Nike World Basketball Festival in September, where I went to New York. I went to New York City. I got to go to their like amazing basketball event. I also met Scottie Pippen that day. And for me to say Aria Hughes over Scottie Pippen, and I hope that I'm going to send her this interview and she'll see. But I met her, and I think it's like when I just met her and had a conversation with her like about I told her my whole like life story. She didn't know what I'd done. I don't think she wasn't really familiar with 1,000 Black Girl Books, and she was just meeting me as like the youngest kid at this really fancy dinner in New York. And she just instantly like connected with me and gave me such mentorship and love. And I think when you meet people who show you what you can be, it can just be so helpful for you. So just like meet someone who is free in all of their being, who is kind, who is loving, who is willing to advise you and support you when they just meet you, and then unwaveringly shows you support after those interactions. It just means so much. And I know that you asked for top three, but like everybody that I've met within the editorial and creative space throughout my time in 1,000 Black Girl Books and in the magazine world has just been incredibly insightful for me. So Aria Hughes, Maddie Kahn, who used to be the former culture director at Glamour and gave me the opportunity to work at Elle.com, Nikki Ogunaki, who's now the editor-in-chief of Mary Claire. Those are like three women all in one who represent like women who I've just always wanted to be a magazine editor for my own magazine. That's always been my dream. And when you meet women, and especially Nikki and Aria, two Black women who embody the dream of just like loving Black media, of loving our stories and wanting nothing more than to get them out there and just telling you to go like kick butt, like there is nothing more important and powerful for me to hear like at this point in my life. So I've met many people who have moved me a lot, but I think it's really for like the ones that always stand out are the ones where you feel like people are actually seeing you, where it's not like they're sort of just obsessed with what is phenomenal about you, but they are interested in you because of all of who you are, as like me as an angsty teenage girl, as well as being an activist and a Harvard student, and just being an only child and being young and having crushes and everything. Like to care about all of that, to want all of me in when you interact with me, and to really listen and see me, what are just creates interactions that I can never forget.
Wow. Wow. Such amazing experiences that have helped to form, the person you're becoming and who you've been thus far. And the activist, that you are. And I think you're 100% correct. The people who see you, the people who do lift you, the people who understand that it's all of you that makes you who you are, and even the cringy little parts that we try to hide from others. And I have to say, you're not intimidating. Others are intimidated by you. So, take that with you. But I
Yeah,
do.
absolutely.
You're right. I think that I have a hard time believing you're ever a shy person. You, you the way that you communicate what you believe in is just so powerful. So you're very much like the women on that stage, and communicating such a forceful message as an activist,
Mm.
and easily going to change the world. And I think I say that all the time about Gen Z kids. To date myself, I'm Gen X, like probably like right at the end of Gen X, getting ready to be beginning millennial there. But I'm still in Gen X, and I've watched millennials and through the whole thing. And I thought, well, the Gen X generation are the ignored, right? We just want to be left alone. Leave us go. And then our parents are the boomers, so I know them well. Um, and I've watched the activism of the millennials. And sometimes I side eye it a little bit and think, oh, maybe this is a little too far or a little, you didn't consider this or that. But when I watch the activism of Gen Z, I often think to myself, they've got it right. They've exactly got it right. And they are going to change the world. And I am so interested in watching the journey, watching your journey and watching the journey of other people in your age group and see how you do that. And I'm interested from you today in what advice you would give other activists like you who are maybe sitting out there, or let's say potential activists. They're sitting out there, they want to get involved, they want to make a difference, but they haven't made the leap yet. They don't know how. What advice would you give to those young people about standing up, speaking out, and having impact on the world in whatever way they think it's important to do so?
Well, I think that my best advice for young activists is to first continue to work on your craft. I think there's a lot to learn. I think that I've come to view the work I do as having a lot more tact than I used to when it comes to talking about issues in our world. Because now that we have so many digital platforms and so many spaces for public discussion, we do have to be important with our words, and we
Mm.
should be careful about knowing exactly what we want, exactly we are frustrated with, and what exactly we are passionate about. So really taking individual time to first just really think about, like, why do you want to help others? Is it because you want to demonstrate, or is it because you want to fix a problem that you feel affects you personally and you think would be beneficial to others? Is it because you want to represent a community that you might not have communicated this issue, like communicated within the community itself about this issue? Is it because you've seen something happen across the world that makes you upset? Let's really narrow down and work to define exactly what we see as the path to liberation for this issue, and also recognize that when we create a vision for a better world, we do lose other things in the process. So, same thing I'm saying about voting, I think applies to designing plans for social action and social action projects, is to think about what you might be leaving out. Because we're now in a world where if you choose to put these ideas out online, everyone is immediately going to be like, well, what about this and this and this and this? And I think that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to always have solutions for every problem. I mean, I collect books with only Black girl protagonists, and I've continued to do that. But the reason why I can do that is because I am in full recognition that the problem that Black girls face is a problem that universally unites all
Mm.
oppressed and marginalized and non-majority groups as people who simply just do not have control over the publishing industry and are not economically advantage enough to create their own stories and get them into classrooms the way that white male authors and white authors historically have.
Right.
That has required me to do years of reading, of studying, of
Mhm.
community conversation, of saying the wrong thing and learning when to say the right thing, of listening and not speaking, to be able to formulate and understand exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. And there
Mhm.
are times where I wish I had not said anything because I didn't know exactly who I might have been leaving out with my words. And I didn't know the way in which 1000 Black Girl Books was fitting into a larger picture. So, first figure out your picture, and then you really want to make sure you understand the
Mhm.
political and social landscapes around you before you decide to take steps towards changing them. Because when we don't fully understand, when we haven't looked at what was happening 100 years before the moment that you think is happening right now, when you don't know, you will miss out on something, guaranteed.
Right.
And a great tool for creating change is, of course, to network across, as in find peers and find people within your social circles and within your life that you can either teach this information to and figure out how it lands on others and see if they're interested in collaboration, is like really share these ideas that this activism is an intellectual process
Mhm.
inherently. And it's not one that means that you need to like study up or have read the most books, but to really live and be critically observant of all of your social surroundings and force people to engage in a dialogue about how they feel about their community and the world they live in that they usually wouldn't, so you can get a true gauge of who you're trying to help and why they want that help.
Right.
I just think that now we have gotten to like, this is advice that I would usually not give, I don't think. But I feel that we've
Mhm.
gotten to a point politically right now in our world and leading up to the election where like having tact and understanding what exactly we want to fight for and
Mhm.
who are we propping up and who are we putting down is just something for activists in this time to be incredibly considerate of and important about. So fostering community conversation and fostering conversation with people in different generations than you is what
Right.
I'm going to recommend most, and really leaning into the practice of just getting our bearings on what is happening in the world right now
Mhm.
before we decide to act, because there are so many simultaneous forms of political violence happening in the United States right now that it is genuinely unfathomably high in a way that I have never had to give advice that would like recognize that. But I think that now we have gotten to a point where that is the advice to give, is to really
Mhm.
try to just get your bearings on your surroundings and how your community needs to heal and what your community has gone through in the past and the extended communities that these issues touch before you start developing these solutions. And that when we start to develop, we should be looking for people who are both like us and also not like us, in understanding and agreeing that this speaks to an ethical, moral, social, or justice based issue that we can work towards. Like, there is a lot of care that I think needs to go into activism for one's mind and one's soul before we begin to give to others. Like, I think we've just gotten to a point where people need to first like really get themselves in a good mental headspace before we try to pour anything else into our communities, because our communities just we just need healthy community members first,
And that
you
is a
know?
piece that people forget often in activism is self-care, caring for yourself, taking a break, taking a rest, and taking care of yourself and your community, your family. That's great advice. Great advice. Now I know you said you're at Harvard and you're studying sociology, African American history, and that's a job in itself. Your boots are not on the ground right now, but is there anything that you are working on side of your desk, or things that a project that you have going on that you'd like to lift up?
Yeah, I guess I would lift up that I am the co-director of the Black Arts Collective at Harvard.
Oh,
And I just got into that role. Two of my lovely friends, or all of them, actually, all the co-directors, former co-directors are my lovely friends, but two of them are going for a semester abroad right now, and I've stepped into the role in their place. And I'm really excited to be connecting and have my boots on the ground at Harvard to just continue to cultivate and like share those lessons. So even if I can't necessarily, like, I wish I could be down in Florida right now doing work at these schools and like connecting with and talking to these teachers and what they're going through. I just continue to try to cultivate the resources and give back to what I have here. And of course, strategize with NEA on ways to get authors to support this cause and to talk with me about what's going on. Um, but yeah, I wanna really prop up Black Arts Collective as something that a lot of people don't know that I do. And as a sociology student, I am working on a urban community college project right now where we're looking at the racial transformation of Boston's community colleges from 1965 to present. So
wow.
that research will be coming out in my I'm an assistant on the project. My roommate and neighbor is also an assistant on the project. And I helped her. We like got the job together. We were so excited about it. So now I'm doing research to actually learn about like, how do colleges become Black colleges? How do schools get economically disenfranchised? And I'm leading a team of 20 artists, Black artists at Harvard. We're going to do the Arts First Festival in Cambridge and have live poetry and performance. We do open mic nights. Like, I'm doing all these things on campus. I'm a staff writer at the Harvard Crimson. Like, even though I think like it can be hard for me to really balance and figure out where I can be the
Mhm.
most useful, I'm really happy that I've been able to bring my voice to the Harvard community in a way that I used to not do, or was just too like overwhelmed to do my freshman year, that now I'm on the Harvard Sociology Undergraduate Advisory Committee. I am working on an impact investing firm idea with a friend of mine. Like, I'm trying to like really be a college kid who's also like just brings a wealth of grounded experience to what I'm witnessing here. So Black Arts Collective is something I would like to shout out as really things that people should be engaged with when they look at my social media, that we are not specific to Harvard, but like the art that I'm creating and resharing and supporting is something that's meant to mobilize the Black arts scene in Boston generally, and just anywhere in the digital space. So can you continue to support and elevate the Black artists that you know, and send them my way on Instagram or anywhere, and continue to prop them up, because art is a form of representation that I never considered myself an artist, but I'm coming to think maybe potentially I could be. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Marley. I know you've got to run, and thank you so much for joining us today, and for taking this time. And we look forward to watching your journey as you continue to have an impact in the space of social justice and everywhere else you roam. And for the rest of you watching, if you like this story and want to hear more stories like it, do subscribe and follow along, and join us next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.